You think the Franklin expedition was killed by ice. In 1845, 2 Royal Navy ships entered the Arctic. Then, months passed. Not a single call for help. These men did not simply freeze. In this video, through notes and silent evidence, in the heart of the Arctic, 2 ghost ships lie sealed in ice. Around them stretches an endless white void, wrapped in deep silence. Only the moan of the wind and the groaning of shifting ice can be heard. Erebus and Terror, true to their names, have become embodiments of dread, lying motionless, frozen in place. Inside, 129 sailors linger like shivering shadows, caught between hope and fear. It is the end of the winter of 1847. For 2 years, these men have been cut off from civilization, imprisoned in the middle of a long polar night. And they do not yet know this. Before the ice breaks them, their minds will. This is the story of Sir John Franklin and his crew. The story of an expedition that slowly turned into a nightmare. A story of bodies swallowed by the ice and of minds that broke long before it. They say the ice eventually melted, but madness remained. So why? What happened during the Franklin expedition that drove these brave men of the Arctic to lose their sanity and turn against one another? Let's go back in time and search for the clues together. May 19th, 1845, England, the port of Greenhithe. Under the pale light of a spring sun, 2 imposing ships weigh anchor, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. They are the pride of the Royal Navy, vessels that had explored Antarctica only a few years earlier. Now their course is set north. Their mission, to find the Northwest Passage, a polar shortcut from Europe to Asia. From the shore, voices rise in celebration. Long live Franklin! May God guide your path! On the deck stands a dignified, white-bearded man, the expedition's commander, the renowned explorer Sir John Franklin. He is 59 years old, and this is his 4th Arctic expedition. At his side stand 2 younger, capable captains, Francis Crozier and James Fitzjames. Around them, the crew climbs the masts, making final preparations. The wind fills the sails. On deck, a monkey screeches. Yes, Lady Franklin had gifted a small monkey to bring good luck. A Newfoundland dog barks. Several ships' cats wander freely. Morale is high. Faith is complete. This was the most well-equipped Arctic expedition of its time. The ships had been reinforced with steam engines, heated from within, and their bows were sheathed in steel, built to break through ice. They carried enough provisions for 3 years, 8,000 tins of preserved meat, soups, vegetables, plus flour, cheese, tea, tobacco, and plenty of lemon juice to ward off scurvy. The total crew, 129 men, seasoned sailors, surgeons, even artists. Everything had been planned down to the finest detail. The Royal Navy believed in progress, in the rising power of science, as if to say, out here, nothing can touch us. Before departure, a young officer, Lieutenant John Irving, writes to his sister, "This is no ordinary voyage, but everything possible has been done to ensure success. The newest inventions, the strongest precautions, all are with us. For the rest, we place ourselves in God's hands." In these lines live excitement, pride, and a quiet trace of uncertainty. Irving adds, 2 years is a long time, even in the life of a healthy man. But whatever comes, we will do our duty. The young man sends the letter, steps back onto the deck, and perhaps looks upon the English coast for the last time. His heart is full of hope. As Erebus and Terror slowly drift down the river and into the North Sea, not a single crewman senses an ill omen, but fate may have struck its first blow, right at the very beginning. As letters are written and laughter shared, no one imagines that the real enemy is already on board, hidden in the solder sealing the food tins below deck, lead, the substance quietly preparing their end. In July of 1845, Franklin's fleet reached Greenland and stopped there. Final fresh supplies were taken on board. Barrels of lemon juice were refilled. A few sick sailors were sent home and replaced. The crew wrote their last letters to their families. Beyond this point, there would be no further contact with civilization. Then the ships turned west, toward Baffin Bay. By late July, whalers spotted Erebus and Terror in the bay, forcing their way through the ice. After that moment, no Western eye would ever see Franklin and his men alive again. They needed a safe harbor for the first winter. As the winter of 1845 closed in, Franklin anchored the ships near Beechy Island, a small island off the Canadian coast. Boats were hauled ashore. A camp was established around the ships. During the long, dark winter nights, keeping morale high was essential. Officers organized games and theatrical performances. Christmas was celebrated. Hot rum was poured. Despite the cold, tents were raised. Stoves were lit. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But sadly, the first deaths came here. A young seaman, John Torrington, the sailor John Hartnell, and Royal Marine William Brain all fell ill and died one after another during that first winter. Captain Franklin and the ship's doctors were puzzled. Official records offered no clear cause of death. Perhaps pneumonia, perhaps tuberculosis, perhaps scurvy. All three were carefully buried on Beechy Island, their graves marked with wooden crosses. The losses shook the crew, but their resolve to continue remained. When spring came and the ice loosened its grip, Franklin set sail once more. In the summer of 1846, the ships pressed on with the exploration. But this time, fortune did not favor them. In August 1846, near Peel Sound, a tightening maze of ice closed in and swallowed them whole. Off the coast of King William Island, the great Erebus and Terror became locked fast, frozen solid, like logs trapped in ice. Summer was ending. The ice was not breaking. Reluctantly, Franklin accepted the inevitable. They would have to endure a second winter in that very place. After all, supplies were still plentiful. The ships were strong. Prayers were spoken. By the summer of 1847, the ice would melt, and together they would continue toward their goal. But in early 1847, an invisible danger was already moving through the ships. Each day, the crew ate their tinned rations and drank their hot tea as usual. Yet many had begun to feel unusually weak, plagued by pains they could not explain. Lead was already accumulating in their blood. Perhaps no one on board, especially the officers, recognized the signs. They may have dismissed them as minor ailments, but lead works quietly First comes nausea, then joint pain, then subtle changes in behavior. No diaries record these moments, but we can imagine them. The chief petty officer begins to confuse orders, drifting in thought. Young sailors lie awake at night, tormented by vivid nightmares. Meanwhile, Francis Crozier carries on with routine duties. Yet a seed of unease takes root in his mind. Why are these men growing so weak? Alongside this, the scourge of scurvy began to take hold. With no fresh fruit, vitamin C was depleted. Gums started to bleed. They had brought lemon juice, but without realizing it, they may have made a fatal mistake. To preserve it, the juice was boiled. In doing so, its vitamin content may have been destroyed. Sailors with bleeding gums complained, "We drink the lemon juice, but it does nothing." Frostbite followed. Cold injuries worsened. On one side, bodies were weakening. On the other, minds were growing clouded. In June of 1847, another loss strikes, sudden and devastating. Sir John Franklin, the leader of this honorable mission, falls ill and dies. The exact cause is unknown, perhaps a heart attack, perhaps an advanced illness. He is 61 years old. He will never see the passage he set out to find, and is given instead to the endless Arctic night. Imagine the shock among the crew. To lose their leader in the middle of the ice is to see hope itself fracture. Franklin's body is likely buried beneath the frozen ground, his grave never to be found. Command passes to Francis Crozier. From this moment on, he carries not only the ships, but the weight of failing men and collapsing morale. In his journal, Francis Crozier records the date of Franklin's death, June 11th, 1847. That day, off the coast of King William Island, the sun hovered low on the horizon. Summer was approaching. Perhaps fear crept into Crozier's mind. Our commander is gone. What do we do now? If so, he did not show it. He continued to lead the crew with outward calm, but conditions were steadily worsening. By the time the sun set again that autumn and the long polar night returned, 24 men were dead, including Franklin. 9 officers and 15 crewmen were gone, a devastating loss. Each evening, Crozier and James Fitzjames may have stared in horror at dwindling supplies and the empty spaces left behind at roll call. Worse still, there was another darkness aboard the ships, one that went unspoken, yet deeply felt. The men began to behave strangely. A sailor standing watch on deck claimed he saw a dark shape moving across the ice at night, as if something were watching them. Another said he heard voices in his cabin where no one stood. One even swore that a pair of eyes watched him from the darkness as he lay in his bunk. Were hallucinations beginning to take hold, or had the polar spirits of Inuit legend descended upon them? No one could say. But today, we know this. Severe lead poisoning eats away at the mind. It can produce paranoia, unfounded fear, and even vivid visual hallucinations. In such a desperate place, anything becomes possible. As the spring of 1848 approached, the situation inside the ships became beyond recovery. Only 105 men remained. They had lost 1/3 of the expedition. Almost no one was truly healthy. Some were losing their teeth to scurvy. Some coughed up blood from tuberculosis. Others clutched their heads, retreating into corners. Their minds eroded by lead. And still, the ships remained prisoners of the ice. A second summer passed, The ice did not release them. The ships did not move. At last, Francis Crozier made the hardest decision of all. They would abandon the ships. Thursday, April 22nd, 1848. Francis Crozier gathers the entire crew on deck. Perhaps his voice trembles, but his resolve does not. Gentlemen, we are abandoning the ships. Supplies are running low, and we remain trapped. We will attempt to escape on foot over land. Frozen faces glance at one another. For a sailor, abandoning one's ship is the gravest step of all. But there is no other choice. Each man is ordered to take only what he can carry: food, tools, personal belongings. 2 large lifeboats are secured atop sledges. If they can reach the back river, they may be able to follow it south to a trading post. Or at the very least, they might find game to hunt and fuel to burn. The crew prepares in haste. Some pack blankets and rifles, others take what little remains: biscuits, tins of food. But evidence discovered later reveals a strange choice. Among the items loaded into one lifeboat are silver cutlery, books, even silk handkerchiefs. That men embarking on a march between life and death would carry such luxuries would puzzle historians for years. Perhaps, at the beginning, they had not yet grasped just how hard the journey would be. Just before setting out, they leave a message beneath a stone. It would come to be known as the Victory Point Note, a document that would enter history, scrawled around the margins of a standard Royal Navy form. The first entry dates to 1847 and reports that all is well. But a second message, squeezed along the edge and dated April 25th, 1848, declares the disaster. Our ships have been beset in the ice since September 12th, 1846. We abandoned the ships on April 22nd, 1848. Captain Sir John Franklin died on June 11th, 1847. A total of 24 officers and men have died. The remaining 105, under the command of Francis Crozier, are proceeding south toward the Back River. Below the trembling signatures of Crozier and James Fitzjames. This is the last written record left behind by the Franklin expedition. It reads like a farewell. They say farewell to the ships. Perhaps the sailors leave with tears held deep inside, or perhaps they are already numb, emptied by fear. When the last man steps down from the snow-covered deck, Erebus and Terror are left behind, abandoned in the ice. They will remain there, frozen in silence, for another 170 years. But no one knows that yet. The 105 survivors, divided into 5 small groups, begin their march south along the western coast of King William Island. On the first day, they manage perhaps 1 or 2 miles. The ground is ice. The air still cuts sharp with cold. They carry compasses in their hands and uncertainty on the horizon ahead. Francis Crozier leads the way. From time to time, he raises his telescope, scanning the distance for a plume of smoke, a line of trees. Nothing. Behind them, sledges heavily laden with supplies are dragged across the snow. In one group, Henry Peglar, a ship's steward, strains at the front. In others, weakened sailors stumble forward. They can cover only a few miles a day, so slowly that each step seems to drain what little hope remains. As the days pass, the march turns into a procession of death. By the end of the first week, at least 5 or 6 men have already died along the way. Some fall to their knees and never rise again. Their companions may cover the bodies with snow and move on, or they may simply pause, exhale, and keep walking. They scan the landscape with rifles, hoping to hunt. Perhaps they manage to shoot a fox or two. But no hunt can feed 100 men. Supplies begin to run out. And then the moment comes. Hunger tightens its grip, pushing humanity to its limits. One night, at a makeshift camp, a small group of sailors whispers. Before them lies the body of a companion who has just died. Frozen, emaciated. One of them hesitates, then slowly draws a knife. They look at one another. No one speaks. Then the blade cuts into flesh. In the darkness, by the trembling light of a small fire, pieces of meat are dropped into a pot of boiling water. Cannibalism begins. No one may have witnessed that moment, but the bones found years later would tell the story. Here, we see what hunger can drive people to do. No discipline, no code of conduct, no civilization proves strong enough to resist the cruelty of nature. In this dark moment, the Franklin expedition collapses, not only physically, but morally. Rules vanish, honor disappears, hierarchy dissolves. Only the instinct to survive remains. As spring begins to loosen its grip on the ice, the last remaining men are fading as well. Some die on the snow near the southern end of the island. One group, perhaps led by Francis Crozier, may have broken away from the main party. According to legend, Crozier and one or two companions may have reached the mainland and died there. Years later, Inuit elders would tell of seeing a tall white leader in a long black coat, carrying a telescope. Very likely Crozier. They saw him exhausted, yet still walking upright. And then he vanished. Spring came, the snow melted, none survived. All 129 men, every single one of them, died on that white land. What happened to the Franklin expedition remained a mystery for many years. In England, the public held on to hope that the heroic sailors would one day return. Lady Jane Franklin refused to let that hope die. She financed search expeditions, determined to find her husband. 11 years later, in 1854, the Scottish explorer John Rae encountered Inuit communities in northern Canada. What he heard from them shook the world. Franklin's men had starved to death, and some, they said, had resorted to cannibalism. London newspapers reacted with horror. Some accepted the accounts. Others rejected them outright. Even Charles Dickens entered the debate, writing an angry article insisting that Franklin's men would never descend into such savagery, claiming instead that the Inuit must have killed and eaten them. But the truth was stubborn, and it would not go away. Between 1857 and 1859, a search expedition led by Francis McClintock combed King William Island inch by inch. At last, the note at Victory Point was found. Elsewhere on the island, they uncovered human skeletons, unspoiled food tins, ammunition, books, buttons, and the remains of a lifeboat. Inside the boat lay 2 skeletons. Scattered around them, silver plates. A silent testimony to desperation. Who knows how many men had dragged the boat across the ice, only for all of them to die in the end. McClintock noticed something else. Some of the bones bore cut marks. Others had been broken open, their marrow consumed. This confirmed what John Ray had been told years earlier. Cannibalism was not a rumor. It was a fact. As the years passed, scientists sought to better understand the Franklin disaster. In the 1980s, a research team led by Owen Beatty exhumed the graves of 3 sailors buried on Beechey Island. Autopsies performed on the nearly perfectly preserved bodies revealed shockingly high levels of lead. In the hair of John Torrington, lead concentrations were found to be up to 100 times above normal. The source was almost certainly the tinned food. The bodies also showed clear signs of scurvy and tuberculosis. In other words, the catastrophe was not caused by a single factor. It was the result of multiple forces converging at once: hypothermia, starvation, disease, and lead poisoning. The Franklin crew did not perish from one mistake. They were consumed by a perfect storm. Meanwhile, Franklin's ships themselves remained lost for more than a century. According to Inuit accounts, one of the vessels sank, while the other wandered among the ice for years, like a ghost ship. In the modern era, in 2014, Canadian government teams located the wreck of HMS Erebus in waters long pointed out by local Inuit knowledge. 2 years later, in 2016, HMS Terror was discovered in a sheltered bay near the shore. Both ships were found in remarkably good condition, as if they had frozen in time. Inside, researchers recovered everyday objects: boots, tools, food tins, and even sealed letters still resting in drawers. These discoveries did not change the ending, but they completed the story. Franklin and his men vanished in what came to be known as the White Death of the Arctic. In truth, they did discover the Northwest Passage. They paid for it with their lives. The notes and maps found later proved the passage existed, but the cost of that discovery was 129 lives. The ice swallowed them. Yet, the cruel truth is this: before the ice claimed them, madness did. Men caught in the grip of lead, darkness, and despair, once among the proudest representatives of civilization, were met by nature at its most unforgiving. And there, they lost their minds, their moral compass, and finally, their lives. In the end, the ice melted, and Franklin's ships returned to the light. But what remained was a cautionary tale of how the human spirit can fracture within that frozen silence. The ice melted, madness remained,